The Moonlight Cafe sat tucked between two grey buildings on the north side of Chicago, its warm amber lights spilling onto the cold November pavement like liquid gold. Inside, the air smelled of roasted coffee beans and cinnamon, a comforting blend that made people forget even briefly the harshness waiting outside. Cho Jae-hun sat alone at a corner table, his back to the wall, old habits from a life where turning your back meant death. His left hand rested on the table, fingers drumming a slow, methodical rhythm against the polished wood. His right side, however, remained perfectly still. The empty sleeve of his expensive black coat was folded and pinned with precision, a testament to someone who refused to let absence define him. He checked his watch. 7:32. She was 32 minutes late. The waitress had asked twice if he wanted to order. Each time Jae-hun had politely declined, his Korean accent slight but present, his English flawless. He kept his gaze on the door, watching couples enter, watching friends laugh, watching the world move forward while he sat frozen in a moment that refused to arrive. By 7:45, he knew. She wasn't coming. The realization didn't sting the way it might have years ago, before the accident, before the explosion that took his arm and nearly took his life. Back then, Jae-hun had been whole, at least physically. Back then, women didn't flinch when they saw him. Back then, he hadn't needed to wonder if his missing limb was the reason someone chose not to show up. He reached for his coffee with his left hand, the movement slightly awkward. He'd trained himself to be ambidextrous out of necessity, but some gestures still felt wrong, like his body was constantly reminding him of what was gone. The cafe door chimed again. Jae-hun didn't look up. He was done waiting. "Excuse me, mister." The voice was small, sweet, and entirely unexpected. Jae-hun lifted his eyes and found himself staring at a little girl no older than 6 or 7. She had dark brown skin that seemed to glow under the cafe lights, her hair pulled into 2 neat puffs decorated with colorful beads. Her eyes, wide, curious, and impossibly kind, locked onto his without hesitation. "Why do you look so lonely?" she asked, tilting her head. For a moment, Jae-hun forgot how to speak. Children didn't approach him. Adults barely did. His reputation preceded him in certain circles, and even those who didn't know his name could sense the danger that clung to him like cologne. But this child saw none of that. "Aliyah!" A woman's voice cut through the air, sharp with urgency. Jae-hun looked up as a woman rushed toward the table, her expression a mixture of panic and apology. She was striking, not in the delicate way magazine covers celebrated, but in the raw, unfiltered way that came from surviving storms most people only read about. Her skin was a deep, rich brown, her natural hair pulled back into a low bun. She wore jeans, boots, and a worn leather jacket that had seen better years, but somehow made her look stronger for it. "I'm so sorry," the woman said quickly, reaching for the little girl's hand. "Aliyah, you can't just walk up to strangers like that." "But Mommy." "He looks sad," Aliyah protested, her small hand pointing at Jae-hun with the kind of honesty only children possessed. The woman, Imani, though Jae-hun didn't know her name yet, finally looked at him directly. Her eyes were guarded, fierce, the eyes of someone who had learned not to trust easily. But there was something else there too, something softer buried beneath the armor. She didn't flinch when she saw his missing arm. That alone made Jae-hun pause. "It's all right," he said quietly, his voice deeper than most expected, smooth like aged whiskey. "She's not bothering me." Imani studied him for a moment longer, as if trying to decide whether he was dangerous or just another broken man trying to survive the city. She must have seen something in his face, exhaustion perhaps, or the same kind of loneliness her daughter had somehow detected, because her expression softened just slightly. "Come on, baby," she said gently to Aliyah. "Let's get our hot chocolate and go." "But Mommy." "Aliyah." The name was firm but not harsh. The little girl pouted but obeyed, allowing herself to be guided toward the counter. But before they reached it, she turned back, waving at Jae-hun with a smile so pure it almost hurt to see. He raised his left hand and waved back. Imani glanced over her shoulder one last time, her eyes meeting his for just a second. There was no pity in that gaze, no disgust, just recognition. As if she too understood what it meant to sit alone in a crowded room, waiting for something that would never come. Then they were gone, blending into the line at the counter. Jae-hun sat there for another 10 minutes, staring at the empty chair across from him. The date he'd arranged through a friend, someone who swore she was kind, understanding, open-minded, had ghosted him. The loneliness he'd tried to push down rose back up, heavy and familiar. But something else lingered too, the image of a little girl who didn't see a monster, the memory of a woman who didn't look away. He left a generous tip on the table and stood, adjusting his coat with practiced efficiency. As he walked toward the door, he noticed something on the floor near where the little girl had been standing. A small stuffed bunny, worn from being loved. Too much, one ear slightly torn. Jae-hun picked it up, turning it over in his hand. He could leave it with the barista. That would be the logical thing to do. Instead, he slipped it into his coat pocket and walked out into the cold Chicago night. Behind him, the cafe continued its warm hum of conversation and clinking cups. Ahead of him, the city stretched out in shadows and neon, a place where men like him built empires on broken bones and blood money. But for the first time in months, Jae-hun felt something shift inside his chest, a crack in the wall he'd built around himself, small but undeniable. He didn't know the woman's name, didn't know her story, but he would. 3 weeks later, fate would bring them together again. And when it did, everything would change. For now, though, Jae-hun walked alone through the snow beginning to fall, the stuffed bunny safe in his pocket, and the memory of a child's question echoing in his mind. Why do you look so lonely? Because he was. But maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to be forever. 3 weeks had passed since that night at the Moonlight Cafe, and Imani Brooks had forgotten all about the man with one arm and sad eyes. She had more pressing concerns, like the stack of medical bills sitting on her kitchen table, each one a reminder that the universe had decided she hadn't suffered enough yet. The apartment was small, but clean, a one-bedroom in a neighborhood that teetered between working class and forgotten. Imani had turned the living room into Aliyah's bedroom, hanging colorful curtains to separate the space and give her daughter some semblance of privacy. The walls were decorated with Aliyah's drawings, bright crayon renditions of butterflies, rainbows, and families that didn't exist. Imani sat at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning, her laptop glowing in the darkness, searching for loans she wouldn't qualify for and payment plans that wouldn't be enough. Her daughter was asleep behind those curtains, unaware that her mother was drowning. The call had come 4 days ago. Aliyah needed surgery. Her appendix was inflamed, bordering on critical. The emergency room visit alone had cost $3,000. The surgery would be another $15,000, minimum. Insurance covered some, but not nearly enough. Imani had already worked 2 jobs for the past year. She cleaned offices at night and worked as a cashier during the day, surviving on 4 hours of sleep and coffee that tasted like burnt regret. But it still wasn't enough. It was never enough. She pressed her palms against her eyes, fighting back tears she couldn't afford to shed. Crying wouldn't pay the bills. Crying wouldn't save her daughter. The universe had taken 2 men from her already. Her first husband, Marcus, died in a car accident when Aliyah was just a baby. Her second partner, Damon, was shot during a robbery at the corner store where he worked. Both times, Imani had been left to pick up the pieces alone. And the neighborhood had started calling her the Black Widow after Damon died, whispered behind hands, spoken in hushed tones as if bad luck was contagious. Some people crossed the street when they saw her coming. Others offered pity that felt more like judgment. Imani had learned to wear the title like armor. If they thought she was cursed, fine. At least they'd leave her alone. She closed the laptop and walked to the window, staring out at the Chicago skyline in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were living lives that didn't involve choosing between rent and food, between medicine and electricity. Somewhere out there, people weren't cursed. A soft sound came from behind the curtain, Aliyah shifting in her sleep. Imani's heart clenched. That little girl was everything. The reason she woke up. The reason she kept fighting. She would find a way. She always did, even if it killed her. The next morning arrived too quickly. Imani dropped Aliyah off at school, kissing her forehead. 3 times their ritual, before watching her run toward the building with her backpack bouncing. The stuffed bunny wasn't in her bag anymore. Aliyah had been heartbroken when she realized she'd lost it, crying for 2 days straight. Imani had promised to find it, knowing it was probably gone forever. She made it through her cashier shift on autopilot, scanning items and forcing smiles at customers who didn't see her. By the time her break came, Imani was ready to collapse. She sat in the break room eating a sandwich she'd made 3 days ago when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Bill collectors had her number memorized by now. But something made her pick up. Hello? Ms. Brooks? The voice was male, professional, with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. Who's asking? My name is Kim Tae-min. I work for Mr. Cho Jae-hun. He would like to speak with you regarding a business opportunity. Imani's mind went blank. I think you have the wrong number. You visited the Moonlight Cafe 3 weeks ago with your daughter, Aliyah. Mr. Cho would like to return something that belongs to her. The bunny. He had Aliyah's bunny. How did you get my number? Imani's voice sharpened. Mr. Cho is a man of considerable resources. He means no harm, Ms. Brooks. He simply wishes to meet with you. Today, if possible. Every instinct told Imani to hang up. Men with considerable resources who tracked down strangers were not men to be trusted. But he had her daughter's bunny, and Aliyah had cried herself to sleep over that toy. Where? She asked finally. The address was in a part of town Imani rarely ventured into, where the buildings were taller, cleaner, and the people walked with the confidence of those who'd never worried about medical bills. She arrived at the designated restaurant just after 3, still wearing her work uniform. The hostess looked her up and down with barely concealed disdain before leading her to a private room. In the back, Jae-hun sat alone at a table, dressed in a charcoal grey suit that probably cost more than Imani's monthly rent. He looked exactly as she remembered. Sharp features, dark hair styled back, and that empty right sleeve pinned with precision. He stood when she entered, a gesture of respect that caught her off guard. Ms. Brooks, thank you for coming. Imani didn't sit. You have my daughter's toy. Jae-hun reached beside him and produced the worn stuffed bunny. I found it that night. I should have left it with the cafe, but he paused. I wanted to return it personally. Imani took the bunny, clutching it tightly. You could have mailed it. I could have. His dark eyes met hers. But I wanted to offer you something else as well. I'm not interested in whatever you're selling. I'm offering you a job, Ms. Brooks. Imani laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. A job. Right. Let me guess. You need someone to warm your bed, and you figured the desperate widow would be easy. Pickings. Jae-hun's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. I need a personal assistant, someone organized, discreet, and unafraid to speak their mind. The salary is $75,000 a year, plus full health insurance for you and your daughter, dental and vision included. The number hit Imani like a physical blow. $75,000. That was more than she'd made in the past 2 years combined. What's the catch? She asked quietly. The catch is that I'm not an easy man to work for. My business dealings are complex. You would be privy to information that most people aren't. You would need to be trustworthy, loyal, and willing to maintain absolute confidentiality. What kind of business? Jae-hun tilted his head slightly. Import and export, real estate, investments. Imani wasn't stupid. She'd lived in Chicago long enough to know what those words meant when spoken by a man like him. You're a criminal. I'm a businessman who operates in gray areas, Jae-hun corrected. But I'm not asking you to do anything illegal. I need someone to manage my schedule, handle correspondence, coordinate meetings, nothing more. Why me? For the first time, Jae-hun's composed expression shifted. Because your daughter looked at me and didn't see a monster. Because you looked at me and didn't see a cripple. Because I believe you're someone who keeps their word. Imani's throat tightened. She thought of the medical bills, the surgery, the landlord who was already asking when she'd have next month's rent. She thought of Aliyah's smile and how it had dimmed lately because Mommy was always tired, always stressed, always on the edge of breaking. I need time to think. Your daughter's surgery is scheduled for next week, Jae-hun said quietly. The hospital requires a deposit of $5,000 within 72 hours, or they'll postpone. Imani's blood ran cold. How do you know that? I told you. I have resources. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Consider this an advance on your first month's salary. No strings attached. If you decide not to take the job, keep it anyway. Imani stared at the envelope like it might explode. Slowly, she reached for it and looked inside. $5,000 in cash. Her hands shook. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Jae-hun stood, adjusting his coat with his left hand. Because I know what it's like to feel broken. And I know what it's like when someone offers you a chance to put the pieces back together. He walked toward the door, then paused. My assistant will contact you tomorrow. If you accept, we'll arrange everything. If not, he glanced back at her. I hope your daughter recovers well. Then he was gone. Imani sat alone in that private room, clutching her daughter's stuffed bunny in one hand and $5,000 in the other, wondering if she'd just been offered salvation or sold her soul to the devil himself. Imani accepted the job on a Tuesday morning, standing in front of the mirror in her tiny bathroom, rehearsing the words she'd say if she changed her mind. But the envelope with $5,000 was already at the hospital, securing Aliyah's surgery slot. The decision had been made the moment she took that money. She'd sold her soul. Now she had to live with the price. The address Kim Tae-min sent her led to a building in the heart of downtown Chicago, all glass and steel. The kind of place where doormen wore better suits than most people owned. The lobby had marble floors that echoed with each step, and a security desk manned by two men who looked like they could break someone in half without breaking a sweat. Imani Brooks, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I'm here to see Mr. Cho. One of the guards made a phone call, speaking in rapid Korean. He nodded, then gestured toward the elevators. 32nd floor. Someone will meet you. The elevator. Ride felt eternal. Imani watched the numbers climb, each one taking her further from the ground, further from the option to run. When the doors opened, she stepped into a reception area that screamed wealth and power. Dark wood paneling, leather furniture, and artwork that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. A young woman in a crisp white blouse stood waiting. Ms. Brooks, I'm Min Jung. Please follow me. They walked through a corridor lined with offices, each one occupied by men in expensive suits speaking Korean, Chinese, and English interchangeably. Some glanced up as Imani passed. Their expressions ranged from curiosity to something that looked uncomfortably like contempt. Min Jung stopped at a set of double doors. Mr. Cho is expecting you. The office beyond was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, making Chicago look small and conquerable. Jae-hun stood with his back to the door, his silhouette sharp against the morning light. Ms. Brooks, he said without turning. Welcome. Mr. Cho. Imani stepped inside, the doors closing behind her with a soft click. He turned then, and she was struck again by how completely he commanded a room despite, or perhaps because of, his missing arm. He wore a black suit today, perfectly tailored to accommodate his body's asymmetry, without drawing attention to it. I wasn't certain you'd come, he admitted. I wasn't certain either. Imani met his gaze. But my daughter's surgery is in 4 days, and I'm not stupid enough to throw away the only real opportunity I've had in years. Something that might have been respect flickered across Jae-hun's face. Honesty. Good. I value that above almost everything else. He gestured to a chair. Sit. We have much to discuss. The next 3 hours were a crash course in Jae-hun's world. He explained her duties, managing his calendar, screening calls, coordinating with his various business contacts, and occasionally accompanying him to meetings where his presence needed to be softened by someone less intimidating. You'll have access to sensitive information, he said. Financial transactions, business negotiations, personal matters. Everything you see and hear remains confidential. No exceptions. And if I break that confidence? Jae-hun's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Then you'll discover why I've maintained my position for the past decade despite operating with one arm. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, which somehow made it more terrifying. Understood, Imani said. You'll start Monday. Minjung will provide you with a company phone, laptop, and access cards. Your salary will be deposited bi-weekly. He paused. Your daughter's surgery. Everything is arranged. The hospital has been paid in full. Imani's breath caught. I didn't ask you to. You didn't need to ask. Consider it an investment in ensuring your focus remains undivided. His tone softened almost, imperceptibly. How is she? Scared, but brave. Imani's throat tightened. She thinks you're some kind of superhero because you found her bunny. Children see the world more clearly than adults, Jae-hun said quietly. They haven't learned to judge based on what's missing. The weight of those words hung between them. Imani left the building 2 hours later with a contract signed, a future secured, and the distinct feeling that she'd just stepped into a current that would either carry her to shore or drag her under. She had no idea which. Monday arrived with the inevitability of a storm. Aliyah's surgery had gone perfectly. Imani had sat in that waiting room for 3 hours, praying to a God she wasn't sure listened anymore, until the doctor emerged with good news. Her baby was fine, recovering safe. Now, 5 days later, with Aliyah staying with a neighbor Imani actually trusted, she walked back into that glass building and took the elevator to the 32nd floor. Minjung met her with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Your office is next to Mr. Cho's. I'll show you. The office was smaller than Jae-hun's, but still larger than Imani's entire apartment. A desk with 2 monitors, a leather chair, filing cabinets, and a window view that made her feel like she was floating above the city. You'll find everything you need in the system, Minjung said. Passwords are in this envelope. Mr. Cho has meetings all morning. He'll brief you at noon. Then she was gone, leaving Imani alone with a computer, and the growing realization that she had no idea what she was actually supposed to do. She figured it out through trial and error, navigating the calendar system, reading through files that made her head spin with legal jargon and financial terminology. By noon, she had a basic understanding of Jae-hun's schedule. Meetings with people whose names she recognized from news articles about organized crime, real estate moguls with questionable reputations, and politicians who definitely shouldn't be on a criminal's contact list. Jae-hun appeared in her doorway at exactly 12 o'clock. How are you adjusting? I'm not sure yet, Imani admitted. This is different from what I'm used to. You'll adapt. I have faith in that. He gestured down the hall. Lunch meeting in conference room B. I need you to take notes. The conference room was filled with men who looked like they ate nails for breakfast. They sat around a long table, speaking in Korean too rapid for Imani to catch even a word. She recognized a few faces from the files she'd read, lieutenants in Jae-hun's organization, each one responsible for different territories and operations. Jae-hun sat at the head of the table, his presence absolute. When he spoke, everyone listened. When he gestured with his single hand, people moved. But Imani noticed something else too. The glances thrown her way when they thought she wasn't looking. The way conversations would pause when she entered. The whispers in Korean that stopped abruptly when Jae-hun's gaze swept the room. After the meeting, as men filed out, one remained behind. Park Min-ho, according to the nameplate Imani had seen in the files. He was younger than the others, maybe late 30s, with sharp features and eyes that calculated everything. This is your new assistant? Min-ho asked in English, his accent thicker than Jae-hun's. He didn't look at Imani when he spoke, as if she were furniture. Ms. Brooks will be handling my administrative needs, Jae-hun confirmed. Min-ho's lip curled slightly. Interesting choice. I wasn't aware we were running a charity. The insult was thinly veiled. Imani's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Jae-hun, however, went very still. Is there something you'd like to say, Min-ho? Only that bringing an outsider, especially one with her reputation, into our operations seems unwise. Min-ho finally looked at Imani, his gaze cold. The Black Widow. Bad luck follows her. 2 men dead. How long before that curse touches you? The room went silent. Imani felt the words like a slap. Every insecurity, every whispered rumor, every judgment she'd endured came flooding back. Her hands clenched at her sides. Jae-hun stood slowly, the movement deliberate. "Ms. Brooks is under my protection. Any disrespect shown to her is disrespect shown to me. Are we clear?" Minho's expression flickered, something between anger and calculation. "Of course, I meant no offense." "Yes, you did." Jae-hun's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Don't let it happen again." Minho left without another word, but the look he shot Imani promised this wasn't over. When they were alone, Jae-hun turned to her. "I apologize. That was inappropriate." "It's nothing I haven't heard before," Imani said, though her voice shook slightly. "That doesn't make it acceptable." He stepped closer, his dark eyes searching hers. "You're not cursed, Ms. Brooks. You're a survivor. There's a difference." Something in Imani's chest cracked open, just a sliver, but enough to let his words in. "Thank you," she whispered. Jae-hun nodded once, then returned to his office, leaving Imani standing in that conference room, wondering how a man who controlled an empire of violence could be the first person in years to make her feel human. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm. Imani learned the business, the legitimate fronts, the grey area dealings, the unspoken rules that governed Jae-hun's world. She coordinated meetings, managed communications, and slowly earned the grudging respect of some of his men. But not all. Park Min-ho watched her with the patience of a predator. His comments were always veiled, his insults wrapped in politeness that fooled no one. And slowly, Imani began to notice others following his lead, men who viewed her as weakness, a crack in Jae-hun's armor. She didn't tell Jae-hun. She'd survived worse. She could handle office, politics, even ones that came with criminal undertones. But late at night, when she lay awake in her apartment with Aliyah sleeping peacefully beside her, Imani couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, a storm gathering on the horizon, and she was standing right in its path. The photograph arrived on a Thursday afternoon, slipped under Imani's apartment door while she was at work. She found it when she came home to check on Aliyah during her lunch break, the white envelope, stark against the worn hallway carpet. Her name was written on the front in precise block letters, no return address, no postage, hand-delivered. Imani's stomach dropped before she even opened it. Inside was a single photo, printed on glossy paper. Aliyah walking out of her elementary school, her backpack covered in butterfly patches, her hand holding her teacher's. The image was taken from across the street, zoomed in close enough to see the smile on her daughter's face. On the back, written, in the same block letters, "We know where to find her." The envelope slipped from Imani's hands, her vision tunneled. Her breath came in short, sharp gasps that didn't seem to bring any oxygen. Not again. Not her baby. Not Aliyah. She'd lost 2 men to violence. She'd survived poverty, grief, and the crushing weight of being alone. But this, a threat against her daughter, this was the one thing that could break her completely. Imani grabbed her phone with shaking hands and dialed the one number she never thought she'd use. Jae-hun answered on the second ring. "Ms. Brooks? They know where she goes to school." Her voice cracked. "Someone left a photo of Aliyah. She couldn't finish the sentence. "Where are you right now?" His voice changed instantly, all business sharp with controlled urgency. "Home, my apartment." "Don't move. Don't open the door for anyone. I'm sending someone now." "Jae-hun, if anything happens to her, nothing will happen to her." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "I promise you that. Stay on the line with me." Imani pressed her back against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor, phone clutched to her ear. She could hear Jae-hun speaking rapid Korean to someone in the background, his tone commanding, leaving no room for argument. "Imani." He used her first name for the first time. "Listen to me. Kim Tae-min is picking up Aliyah from school right now. He'll bring her somewhere safe. My men are en route to you. 5 minutes. Who would do this? Tears streamed down her face. I haven't done anything. I've just been working, doing my job. This isn't about you. This is about me. Jae-hun's voice hardened. Someone is using you to get to me. I should have anticipated this. I should have protected you better. This isn't your fault. Yes, he said quietly. It is. 3 minutes later, Imani heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving with purpose. A knock at the door, firm, but not aggressive. Ms. Brooks, we're with Mr. Cho. She recognized one of the voices. Jun, one of Jae Hun's senior security team. She'd seen him at the office, always watching, always alert. Imani opened the door to find 4 men, all dressed in dark suits, all carrying themselves like soldiers. Jun stepped forward, his expression respectful but serious. We need to move you now. Mr. Cho's orders. My daughter. Already secure. Tae-min has her. She's safe. Jun gestured down the hall. Please, Ms. Brooks. We need to go. Imani grabbed her purse and the photograph evidence and followed them out. 2 men walked ahead, 2 behind, forming a protective box around her. They moved quickly through the building, out a back entrance she'd never noticed, and into a black SUV with tinted windows. The drive took 20 minutes, winding through Chicago's streets, until they reached a building Imani didn't recognize. Modern, secure, with underground parking that required multiple checkpoints to access. The elevator took them to the top floor. When the doors opened, Jae Hun was waiting. He looked different than she'd ever seen him. His suit jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled up on his left arm, the pinned right sleeve more visible without the jacket to hide it. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hand through it. His expression was tight, with barely controlled rage. Aaliyah, Imani asked immediately. In the other room with Tae-min. She thinks it's an adventure. Jae Hun's eyes scanned her face. Are you hurt? No, just... Imani's composure shattered. The adrenaline drained away, leaving only the fear. They threatened my baby. Jae Hun closed the distance between them in 2 strides. For a moment, Imani thought he might embrace her. His left hand lifted slightly, hovering near her shoulder. But he stopped, maintaining a careful distance, respecting boundaries, even in crisis. You and Aaliyah will stay here until this is resolved, he said. This is my personal residence. The security is absolute. No one gets in without my authorization. Who's doing this? Jae Hun's jaw clenched. I have suspicions, but I need confirmation before I act. He gestured toward a hallway. Let me show you to your daughter. Imani followed him through the penthouse, and it was a penthouse, she realized, the kind of place that appeared in magazines about how the other half lived. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture that probably cost more than cars, artwork that belonged in museums. They found Aaliyah in what appeared to be a guest room, sitting on a massive bed with Kim Tae-min, who was patiently explaining something about the building's architecture in terms a 6-year-old could understand. Mommy! Aaliyah jumped off the bed and ran to Imani, who scooped her up despite her daughter getting too big to be carried easily. Hey baby, you okay? Mr. Tae-min said we're having a sleepover at Mr. J's house. Is that true? Can we really stay? Here? Aaliyah's eyes were bright with excitement, completely unaware of the danger that had brought them here. Yeah, sweetie, just for a little while. Imani buried her face in her daughter's hair, breathing in the familiar scent of the strawberry shampoo they used. Jae Hun watched them from the doorway, his expression unreadable. Tae-min excused himself quietly, leaving the 3 of them alone. There are clothes in the closet that should fit both of you, Jae Hun said. If you need anything. Else just ask. The kitchen is fully stocked. Consider this your home for as long as necessary. Aaliyah wiggled out of Imani's arms and walked right up to Jae Hun, tilting her head back to look at him. Mr. Jae, are you a superhero? Mommy was crying, and now she's not. Jae Hun crouched down to Aaliyah's level, balancing on one knee with the ease of someone who'd learned to compensate for missing limbs. I'm not a superhero, but I promise that nothing bad will happen to you or your mommy. Okay. Okay. Aaliyah reached out and hugged him, her small arms wrapping around his neck. Imani saw Jae Hun freeze, his single arm hovering uncertainly before carefully, gently, returning the embrace. When Aaliyah pulled back, there was something different in Jae Hun's eyes, something vulnerable and raw that he quickly masked. Why don't you explore the room a bit, baby? Imani suggested. I need to talk to Mr. J. Once Aliyah was distracted with the novelty of a TV bigger than their living room wall, Imani followed Jae Hun into the hallway. "Tell me the truth," she said quietly. "How bad is this?" Jae Hun was silent for a moment, his gaze distant. "Park Min-ho. He's been consolidating power, making alliances with people who want to see me removed. Bringing you into my organization gave him an opening, a way to destabilize me without direct confrontation. Because I'm the Black Widow. Because people think I'm cursed. Because he sees you as a weakness." Jae Hun's expression hardened. "He's wrong. What are you going to do? What needs to be done?" The words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. Imani grabbed his arm, his left arm, the only one he had, stopping him before he could walk away. "Don't do anything that will get you killed, please." Jae Hun looked down at where her hand gripped his sleeve, then back up at her face. "Why does that matter to you?" "Because—" Imani struggled to find words for something she didn't fully understand herself. "Because you gave me a chance when no one else would. Because my daughter thinks you're a hero. Because despite everything you are and everything you do, you've shown me more kindness than anyone has in years." Something shifted in Jae Hun's expression, the careful mask he wore cracking just slightly. "I lost my arm 3 years ago. Explosion during a territory dispute. I was unconscious for 2 weeks. When I woke up, half my organization had already started dividing up my territory, assuming I was too broken to lead." He paused, his gaze intense. "I proved them wrong, but since then I've been alone, isolated. People see the missing arm before they see the man. They assume weakness." His voice dropped. "You never did. That's because the arm isn't what defines you," Imani said softly. "The first time I saw you at that cafe, I didn't see a disabled man or a criminal. I saw someone who looked as lonely as I felt." Jae Hun's hand, his left hand, his only hand, lifted and gently touched her cheek, his thumb brushing away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "You're not alone anymore, neither am I." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things neither was ready to name. Then Aliyah called from the other room, asking if they could order pizza, and the spell broke. That night, after Aliyah was asleep in the guest room, Imani stood by the massive windows overlooking Chicago, watching the city lights twinkle like earthbound stars. She heard Jae Hun approach. Before she saw him, his footsteps careful, giving her the option to send him away. She didn't. "Can't sleep?" he asked, standing beside her. "Too much adrenaline." Imani wrapped her arms around herself. "I keep thinking about that photo, about what could have happened if you hadn't, but I did, and nothing happened." Jae Hun's reflection in the glass was serious. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning. There are things I need to handle personally." Fear spiked through her. "What kind of things?" "The kind that ensure you and Aliyah never have to look over your shoulders again." He turned to face her directly. "I need you to trust me." Imani studied his face, the sharp angles, the dark eyes that had seen too much, the set of his jaw that spoke of determination forged in violence. He was a dangerous man, a criminal, someone who built his empire on broken rules and blood, but he was also the man who returned a lost stuffed bunny, who paid for her daughter's surgery, who looked at her like she was worth protecting. "I trust you," she said, and meant it. Jae Hun nodded once, then did something unexpected. He reached up with his left hand and loosened his collar, revealing the edge of scarring that ran from his shoulder down where his right arm had been. The skin was twisted, angry, a permanent reminder of the explosion that had tried to kill him. "This is who I am," he said quietly. "Broken, scarred, built from pieces that don't quite fit together anymore." His eyes met hers. "But I keep my promises, and I promise you no one will hurt your daughter." Imani reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, she placed her hand on his shoulder, right where the scarring began. "You're not broken. You're surviving. There's a difference." Jae Hun's breath caught. No one had touched his scars before. No one had looked at them without pity or disgust. But Imani looked at him the way Aliyah had that first night, without judgment, without fear, seeing past the damage to the man underneath. "When I come back," he said, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept buried, "we need to talk about what this is becoming." "What is it becoming?" Imani asked, though she already knew. "Something neither of us planned. Something that might be the most dangerous thing I've ever done." His left hand covered hers where it rested on his shoulder. "And I've done a lot of dangerous things." Before Imani could respond, her phone buzzed. A text message from an Apunsei, unknown number. Her blood ran cold as she read it. "Keeping the widow won't save you. We're coming for everything you love." Jae-hun read it over her shoulder, his expression going deadly calm, the kind of calm that preceded storms. "Change of plans," he said, his voice like ice. "I'm not waiting until morning." Jae-hun left the penthouse at 3 in the morning, moving through the darkness like a shadow with purpose. Imani watched from the window as his convoy of black vehicles disappeared into Chicago's empty streets, each one carrying men who would kill or die at his command. She didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. She checked on Aliyah 6 times, watching her daughter's peaceful face, so innocent to the violence swirling around them. By dawn, Imani was exhausted but wired, drinking coffee that tasted like ash while staring at her phone, waiting for news she wasn't sure she wanted to receive. The first day passed in agonizing silence. Taemin checked in periodically, his updates minimal. "Mr. Cho is handling the situation. He'll contact you when it's safe." The second day, Imani tried to maintain normalcy for Aliyah's sake. They watched movies, colored pictures, played games. But every time her daughter asked when they could go home, Imani's heart fractured a little more. The third day brought snow, heavy, relentless, covering Chicago in white that made everything look cleaner than it was. Imani stood at the window again, watching the city disappear under winter's blanket, when her phone finally rang. Taemin. His voice was tight. "Ms. Brooks, Mr. Cho is returning. He'll be there within the hour." "Is he okay?" A pause. "He's alive." That wasn't the same thing as okay. 63 minutes later, Imani counted every one. The penthouse door opened. Jae-hun walked in, and Imani's breath caught. He was covered in snow, his black coat dusted white, his hair wet and plastered to his forehead. But it was the exhaustion in his eyes that struck her most, a bone-deep weariness that went beyond physical fatigue. His left hand was bandaged, blood seeping through the white gauze. His suit was torn at the shoulder, revealing more of the scarring he usually kept hidden. He looked like he'd walked through hell and barely made it back. Jae-hun, Imani crossed the room in seconds. He held up his bandaged hand, stopping her. "I'm fine. Just tired." "You're bleeding." "Superficial. I've had worse." His gaze swept the room. "Where's Aliyah?" "Napping. She wore herself out playing." Imani guided him to the couch despite his protest. "Sit down before you fall down." For once, he didn't argue. He sank onto the leather couch with a wince, his body finally admitting what his pride wouldn't, that he was in pain. Imani disappeared into the bathroom and returned with a first aid kit she'd found earlier. She knelt beside him, carefully unwrapping the blood-soaked bandage on his hand. "What happened?" she asked quietly, examining the deep gash across his palm. "Minho is no longer a problem." Jae-hun's voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of someone who'd done things he couldn't unsay. "Neither are his associates, the ones who sent that photograph, who threatened your daughter, who thought they could use you to destroy me." Imani cleaned the wound with antiseptic, and Jae-hun didn't flinch, despite how much it must have hurt. "Did you kill them?" "Some. The others, they'll wish I had." He met her eyes. "Does that frighten you?" It should have. Imani knew that. She should be terrified of this man who commanded violence like other people commanded respect. But all she felt was relief. Dark, complicated relief that her daughter was safe. "No," she admitted. "It doesn't. Does that make me a bad person? It makes you a mother protecting her child. There's nothing bad about that." Jae-hun watched her bandage his hand with careful precision. "You're good at this." "I've had practice. Marcus, my first husband, worked construction, always coming home with cuts and scrapes. The memory didn't hurt as much as it used to. I learned. Tell me about him. About them both. Imani sat back on her heels, surprised by the request. Why? Because I want to know you. The real you, not just the woman who manages my calendar and faces down my organization with her chin up. So Imani told him. About Marcus, who'd made her laugh until her sides hurt and dreamed of opening his own business someday. About the car accident that took him on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, leaving her pregnant and alone at 23. About Damon, who'd come into her life 2 years later, patient and kind, helping her raise Aliyah like she was his own. About the robbery, the senseless violence, the second funeral that convinced everyone she was cursed. People started avoiding me after that, Imani said quietly. Like death was contagious. Like I'd somehow caused it by existing. She looked up at Jae-hun. The Black Widow. That's who I became. Not a person, just a warning. Jae-hun's left hand reached out, tilting her chin up gently. You're not a curse. You're a survivor. And anyone who can't see that is blind. You keep saying that, because you need to hear it until you believe it. His thumb traced her jawline, the touch feather-light. You've been alone for too long, Imani. So have I. The intimacy of the moment wrapped around them like the snow falling outside. Quiet. Inevitable, transforming everything it touched. What are we doing? Imani whispered. Something reckless, something that breaks every rule I've set for myself. Jae-hun leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. Something I can't seem to stop. Before either of them could close the remaining distance, a small voice came from the hallway. Mommy? They pulled apart as Aliyah padded into the room, rubbing her eyes. She stopped when she saw Jae-hun, her face lighting up despite his haggard appearance. Mr. Jae, you're back! She ran to him, climbing onto the couch beside him, with the unself-conscious ease of children who haven't learned to fear yet. Jae-hun's expression softened instantly. Hello, little one. Did you have a good nap? Uh-huh. I dreamed about butterflies. Aliyah noticed his bandaged hand. You have an OE. Just a small one. Your mother fixed it. Aliyah looked between them, something calculating in her young eyes that was far too perceptive. Are you gonna be my new daddy? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. Imani's heart stopped. Aliyah, that's not... We haven't... But Jae-hun surprised her. He looked at Aliyah seriously, giving her the respect of an honest answer. Would you like that? Aliyah nodded enthusiastically. You're nice. And you found my bunny. And you make Mommy smile. She doesn't smile a lot anymore, but she smiles when you're here. Out of the mouths of children came truths adults spent years dancing around. Jae-hun glanced at Imani, a question in his eyes. She saw her own uncertainty reflected back at her, mixed with something else. Hope, fragile and terrifying. If your mother permits it, Jae-hun said carefully to Aliyah, I would be honored to be part of your family. But that's a big decision, one we all need to talk about. I permit it, Aliyah announced immediately, as if it were that simple. Maybe it was. Later, after Aliyah was distracted with dinner that Tai Min had delivered, apparently the man could arrange anything, Imani and Jae-hun stood in the kitchen, the city lights twinkling beyond the windows. She's 6 years old, Imani said quietly. She doesn't understand what she's asking for. Maybe not, but she understands what she needs. Jae-hun set down the glass of whiskey he'd been nursing. And so do you. What I need is to keep her safe, to give her stability, to stop being alone. Jae-hun closed the distance between them, his left hand finding hers. To let someone help carry the weight you've been shouldering by yourself for years, to believe that maybe, just maybe, you deserve something good after all the bad. Imani's eyes burned with unshed tears. You're a criminal, Jae-hun. Your world is violent and dangerous. How is that good for my daughter? For me? My world is what it is. I won't lie about that. His grip tightened on her hand. But I can keep you both safe in ways no civilian ever could. I can give Aliyah opportunities, education, a future without financial worry. And I can give you—" He paused, searching for words. "Everything I am. Which isn't much, considering I'm literally half the man I used to be. But it's yours if you want it. Don't say that. Don't reduce yourself to—" Imani pressed her hand against his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm. "You're not half a man. You're more whole than anyone I've ever met." Jae-hun caught her hand, holding it over his. "Heart. Then say yes. Not because Aliyah asked, not because you need protection or money or security. Say yes because you want this too." Imani looked up at him. This complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who'd entered her life by accident and somehow become essential. She thought about every reason she should say no, every logical argument against building a life with someone whose empire was built on violence. But logic had never kept her warm at night. Logic hadn't paid for her daughter's surgery. Logic hadn't looked at her like she was worth something precious. "I want this too," she whispered. "God help me, I want this too." Jae-hun's expression transformed, relief and joy mixing with something deeper, something that looked remarkably like love. He pulled her closer with his single arm, and Imani went willingly, wrapping her arms around him, careful of his injuries, holding him like she could protect him from the world that had tried so hard to break him. "I need you to understand something," he said into her hair. "I'm not good. I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more terrible things. The men I command, the business I run, it's not clean or simple or safe. I know. And you're still choosing this? Choosing me?" Imani pulled back enough to look at his face. "You chose me first, when you could have just mailed that bunny back, when you could have hired any assistant in Chicago, when you could have let us fend for ourselves." She touched his scarred shoulder gently. "You chose to protect us, to care. So yes, I'm choosing you. All of you. The good, the bad, and everything in between." Jae-hun kissed her then, not gentle, not tentative, but with the desperate intensity of someone who'd been alone too long and finally found home. Imani kissed him back, pouring years of loneliness and fear and hope into that single connection. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jae-hun rested his forehead against hers. "I need to tell you 3 things." "Okay. First, Minho won't be coming back. Neither will anyone else who threatened you. I made sure of that." Imani nodded, accepting the violence that came with his protection. "Second, no one in my organization will ever disrespect you again. You're not my employee anymore. You're—" He paused, searching for the right words. "You're mine, and I'm yours. That's how it works now." "And third," Jae-hun's left hand cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I don't pretend to understand love. My life hasn't allowed much room for it. But whatever this is, this thing that makes me want to burn down the world to keep you safe, that makes me wake up thinking about your smile, that makes me want to be better than I am, I think it might be that." Imani's tears finally fell, but they weren't sad. "That's a terrible declaration of love. I'm aware. I'm better at threats than romance." A small smile played at his lips. "But it's honest. And it's yours. Then I accept your terrible, honest declaration." Imani smiled through her tears. "And I offer one back. I think I've been falling for you since that first night in the cafe, when you looked so lonely that even my 6-year-old daughter could see it. I just didn't want to admit it." "Why not?" "Because I was scared. Because everyone I love dies. Because I thought maybe I really was cursed." She took a shaky breath. "But you're still here. And maybe that means something." "It means," Jae-hun said firmly, "that curses are bullshit, and you deserve every good thing this world has to offer." From the living room, Aliyah's voice called out, "Mommy! Mr. J, the movie's starting!" They looked at each other and laughed, the kind of laughter that releases tension and fear and makes room for something lighter. "We should probably discuss logistics," Imani said as they walked toward the living room. "Where we'll live, how this works with Aliyah, what I tell people, we'll figure it out. Together." Jae-hun stopped her before they reached the doorway. "But right now, let's just watch a movie with your daughter and pretend for one evening that we're a normal family. We'll never be normal. No, he agreed, but maybe we'll be happy. That's better. They settled on the couch, Aliyah between them, chattering about the animated movie she'd chosen. And as Jae-hoon's left arm stretched across the back of the couch, his fingers finding Imani's shoulder in a gesture both possessive and protective, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe, wanted, home. Outside, snow continued to fall on Chicago, covering the city's sins in pristine white. Inside, a makeshift family found its shape, built from broken pieces that somehow fit together perfectly, creating something stronger than the sum of its parts. Jae-hoon looked at Imani over Aliyah's head, and she looked back, both of them understanding without words that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead. His organization to navigate, her past to reconcile, a daughter to raise in a world complicated by violence and love intertwined. But they would face it together. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough.